Well, so, you talk about things that are really important to U.S. culture, particularly right now, one of which is how there's been a movement for women to be a deep part of the workforce. So they are told they should have careers and they should work hard in those careers and they should put off having children until many, many years later. And even then, you had posted a tweet about that the high-paying jobs can subsidize the fact that the women have to freeze their eggs to be able to have children later in life. Is that going on? Is that sort of culture happening in Romania as well?
It is. It is in the cities, and it's kind of slowly morphing into that because everything that's happening in Western Europe and in the U.S. is slowly happening here as well. The contrast between the city here, which is very similar to a place like London where I lived for a while, and the rural areas is still extremely sharp. So rural areas are, as you can imagine, but much more traditional and much more retrograde in some ways. But it is happening. I mean, people working in multinationals, people delaying, marriage, children, prioritizing their careers. It's not necessarily new because it was under communism, it was kind of a very kind of forcefully almost gender egalitarian norm where women, had to be, there had to be parity in some certain industries, quotas, they really, really forced through gender equality. And, we've had like huge numbers of women engineers, like in the 50s, 60s. It was quite a, almost kind of like an example country for how you can integrate women into the workforce. The second you didn't have to do that anymore, people just went back and, became, stay-at-home moms or nurses or stuff that, wasn't necessarily as high status or as high earning, but was, fit their lifestyle or their interests a bit more. And I see this a lot, especially in countries where, gender equality is kind of like a state program. The second you lift the restrictions, people just relax back into like their normal momentum as men and women.
To me, that's some of the stuff that's the hottest that you put out, right? Like, because my wife and I waited a long time to have a child and then ended up having all sorts of problems that we did not expect. And like we talk about it, that it's not really fair to say that somebody lied to us, but we were definitely taken in by this concept of just wait. The most fulfilled that you can be is by having a career, and then, you can have kids on the side, but that's not fundamental to the human experience. And but when you go out and talk about that stuff out in the wider public, people show up and they are very angry when you start to push against the kind of cultural changing norms towards having children at a later time. Have you felt that?
Yeah, absolutely. I felt it on both ends. I mean, I was that person, who either didn't hear anything about having children. It just wasn't a priority. It was all about building your career, and people were keep telling me to, freeze my eggs and, whatever, you can have children at 40. And then you kind of have to go deep into like the bowels of the internet to get actual data about this stuff. Cause it's not out there. No one's promoting this because it's against, it's kind of a freedom reducing aspect of nature. This is the kind of thing that even with the technology we have now, and there's been so much money poured into this, you can't really game nature that much, but after 35, your fertility has a inverse hockey stick. It just doesn't work. So the fact that I know a lot of women just by being a woman and having women friends that kind of fell into this trap, and then either were desperate to either get married in the short term or didn't really know what to do with themselves, or went the other route and became like extreme feminists and railed against the patriarchy and just kind of sublimated their rage into extreme politics with the pussy hats and the whatever marches. You can see that there's a problem. No one's really talking about what the source may be in a nuanced way. And I think the problem is nature itself. And that's probably the thing that grates feminists the most, because it's not really, you can't really introduce a social program that's going to change this. This is, the bare facts of, nature red in tooth and claw. And there's no way to overcome this.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest parts about this conversation is that like, for example, my wife is an aerospace engineer turned physical therapist. Her IQ, her ability to operate in the world is super high. So there is definite value of having that level of intelligence be a part of the overall economic system. But because it's complicated, because having her in the workforce now, I think most people don't realize that one of the reasons we have so much downward pressure on wages is we effectively doubled the amount of people in the workforce. And then at the exact same time, didn't tell women like, hey, you can deal with this. You must deal with the state of nature, this fact that we have, because the corporations actually benefit by saying, just put it off, because you get the best working years of a woman. And those were years that nature requires her to use into putting towards children. But it's just it's too nuanced of a conversation for regular people to be having on a level that allows our culture to adapt.
Yeah, it was quite shocking to find out that one of the big consulting firms just subsidized, freezing someone's eggs, just to milk another 5 to 10 years out of their employees, which is...
Wait, no, that was legit. I thought that was a joke. They actually did that?
Yeah, they help you finance it. It's pretty intense. It doesn't surprise me, obviously.
Oh, that's dark.
Some women would see this as a perk. It's either this or they have to pay for it. So I guess if they want to foot the bill, but it is pretty dystopian. And the truth is, I mean, this is such a so-called black pill territory, because it is pretty stark. The reality of the situation is pretty stark. And even if you think, you have these high IQ women who could, benefit society immensely by becoming, physicists or whatever. But they could also benefit society by having, 5 extremely high IQ children who would, go into the workforce and, propagate their intelligence in multiple directions. So it is in a way, a local benefit or a proximal benefit, but it's also, the opportunity cost to spread the good genes is also a huge thing that no one wants to talk about, because it's like, oh my God, this is like, Handmaid's Tale. You want to turn women into breeding mares and whatever, but it is just the stark truth.
Yeah, and I think I was completely unprepared for this discussion, because even I myself would have told my wife, like, it would be a total loss for you to exit the workforce for any amount of time to have children. But now that we actually have a child, the idea of forcing my wife to go work if she didn't want to would be one of the most painful things that a husband could do, right? Because you see how much she wants to bond with the child, how much time she wants to spend with her. We're fortunate that she actually built her career so that way she could do both. But man, it is not a conversation that is out in the open at all.
Yeah, and the way, kind of the feminists in the West solve this problem is to just kind of offload it to lower income women. So it's not like, the child is being raised by robots or by some, ethereal cloud thing. There are still women who are not, doing astrophysics or, something really interesting and personally, developing or contributing to society. It's just literally other women from lower income countries coming in, getting paid, I don't know, $10 an hour to play mother to your child. I don't know necessarily if displacing this work to the other place, or just like maybe, not having that bonding opportunity with your kid, especially because, a lot of the women nowadays are expected to be back in the office, 6 months later, and to go back to being a partner or whatever high intensity job they have. So, childcare will be delegated to a carer for a lot of them. It's not this, utopian egalitarianism that we imagine, because it's just shifting work around.
Thanks for checking out this podcast short. If you like this interview, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button and hit that bell so you always get notified about this podcast. And if you're really interested in conversations like this, you may want to consider joining the Articulate Ventures Network. To find out more, go to network.articulate.ventures.